October 25th, 1942. Guadalcanal, midnight. The jungle in front of Henderson Field erupts. 3,000 Japanese soldiers from the Sendai Division, one of the Imperial Army's most experienced and decorated regiments, come screaming out of the dark toward a thin line of Marines holding a narrow pass. The first wave throws themselves onto the barbed wire deliberately, not by accident. They use their own bodies as bridges, flesh pressed into the cutting metal so the men behind them can leap across and reach the Marine positions. At the center of the American mine, a 25-year-old sergeant from Raritan, New Jersey, is running 4 heavy machine guns. His name is John Basilone. He's been on this island for 2 months. He has watched it try to kill him in every way a jungle can: disease, heat, starvation rations, Japanese air raids, artillery, and now this. The guns fire until the ammunition runs out. Basilone runs 150 yards through open ground under direct enemy fire to a supply point, grabs ammunition, runs back. He feeds the guns. They keep firing. One gun section is destroyed, then another. At the end of the night, only Basilone and 2 other men are still standing. When the last belt of ammunition is gone, he fights with a pistol and a machete at almost arm's length. At dawn, Colonel Lewis Puller walks the line and counts the dead in front of it. Nearly 1,000 Japanese soldiers, stopped by a handful of Marines and 4 machine guns and 1 sergeant from New Jersey who ran through the killing ground to keep the guns fed. America is about to make John Basilone the most famous Marine in the country. They will put him on the cover of Life magazine. They will send him across the nation on a war bond tour. They will offer him a commission, a safe assignment, a way to survive the war with his Medal of Honor and his life intact. He will turn all of it down. He will go back. This is the story of why.
John Basilone was born on November 4th, 1916, in Buffalo, New York, the 6th of 10 children of Salvatore Basilone, who had come to America from Colle Sanita, a small hilltop town in the Campania region of southern Italy, one of those places where the land was beautiful and impossible, and the only real option was to leave. Salvatore settled in Raritan, New Jersey, a small borough on the Raritan River, where the Italian immigrant community had put down roots. He worked as a tailor. He raised 10 children in the specific, demanding way that large immigrant families in early 20th century America were raised. Close, Catholic, loud, and with the understanding that everyone contributed and nobody complained about contributing. John was not a natural student. School held his attention in the way that things hold the attention of a boy who is built for physical action and concrete problems, rather than abstractions in classrooms. He left before finishing high school at 15. He found work as a golf caddy at the local club. Physical, outdoor, skilled enough to require attention, social enough to teach him how to read rooms and people. He enlisted in the United States Army at 17. The year was 1934. The Depression was grinding through its worst years. The military offered what the Depression did not: regular pay, regular meals, structure, and the possibility of going somewhere other than where you already were. Basilone went to the Philippines. The Philippines changed him completely. He spent 3 years in Manila, in the heat and noise and color of a city that was nothing like Raritan, New Jersey, and everything like the world he had been looking for, without knowing he was looking for it. He loved it with the total, uncomplicated love that young men sometimes feel for the first place that feels like it was made specifically for them. He boxed competitively. He was good enough to win matches, good enough to earn a reputation in the ring as someone who combined technical skill with the particular willingness to absorb punishment that separates competitive fighters from casual ones. The other soldiers started calling him Manila John.
not as mockery, as recognition. The nickname was a flag planted on an identity he had grown into. He was discharged in 1937 and went home to New Jersey. He drove a truck. He worked. He tried to build a civilian life in Raritan with the skills he had and the person he had become in Manila. It didn't fit. The New Jersey he came back to was not the place he had left. Or rather, he was not the person who had left it. Manila had given him something that Raritan could not replicate, and the absence of it sat in him like a weight. In 1940, he enlisted in the Marine Corps. The reasoning, as he explained it to people who asked, was practical. The Marines were his fastest route back to the Pacific. Whatever was coming, and by 1940, anyone paying attention understood that something was coming, would happen in the Pacific. And the Pacific meant the Philippines, and the Philippines meant Manila. He was right about the Pacific. He was wrong about Manila. The Japanese bombed it in December 1941, 8 hours after Pearl Harbor. The Philippines fell in May 1942. The world that Basilone had spent 3 years falling in love with was gone. By then, he was on Guadalcanal. The Marines had landed on the island in August 1942, the first American offensive operation of the Pacific War, a desperate gamble to seize the airfield the Japanese were building before it could be used to interdict Allied supply lines to Australia. The airfield became Henderson Field. The Marines who held it became the reason the Pacific War did not end in a Japanese victory in 1942. Basilone was assigned to the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines, under Colonel Louis Puller, Chesty Puller, already a legend, a man who had been decorated for combat in Haiti and Nicaragua and China, and who would end his career as the most decorated Marine in the Corps' history. Under Puller, Basilone was a machine gun section leader, responsible for positioning and coordinating the heavy .30 caliber Browning M1917s that were the backbone of the infantry's defensive firepower. His section's position was on the southern perimeter of Henderson Field, in a section of the line that the Marines had taken to calling Coffin Corner, a name that communicated, with the specific dark humor of men who have been in a dangerous place long enough to name its features, exactly what they thought of their tactical situation. The Japanese had been trying to retake the airfield since the Marines landed. They understood, correctly, that Henderson Field was the strategic center of the entire campaign. Whoever controlled it controlled the air over the Solomon Islands. Whoever controlled the air controlled the sea lanes. Whoever controlled the sea lanes controlled the outcome. On the night of October 24th to 25th, 1942, they sent 3,000 of their best soldiers to take it back. They ran into John Basilone. The attack began at midnight with artillery preparation. Shells walking across the Marine perimeter, probing for gaps, trying to suppress the machine gun positions before the infantry came. Then the infantry came. The Sendai Division, veterans of campaigns in China and Malaya, soldiers who had been winning for 2 years against every army they had faced, came out of the jungle in waves. The first wave did not charge. It sacrificed. Men threw themselves onto the barbed wire in front of the Marine positions, pressing their bodies into the concertina, pinning it down with their weight so the men behind them could cross without slowing. Basilone's 4 guns opened up. The physics of what a heavy machine gun does to infantry at close range in the dark is not something that translates into clean language. The Browning M1917 fired at a rate of approximately 450 rounds per minute, firing a .30 caliber round that at ranges of 50 to 200 yards carried enough energy to pass through a man and continue. Basilone had 4 of them, positioned to cover the approaches to the pass. The Japanese kept coming. This is the part that requires understanding of what the Sendai Division was. These were not conscripts. These were not men sent into the attack by officers with pistols behind them. These were experienced soldiers following a tactical doctrine that had worked in every campaign they had fought, that mass, momentum, and willingness to absorb casualties would overwhelm a defensive position and produce a breakthrough. It had worked in China. It had worked in Malaya. It had worked in the Philippines. It was not working at Henderson Field. Basilone moved between the 4 gun positions constantly, checking rates of fire, clearing jams, directing the gunners, managing the ammunition. A machine gun in sustained fire generates heat that makes it unreliable. Metal expands. Mechanisms that work in controlled conditions begin to bind and fail in combat. Keeping 4 guns operational through a sustained engagement required continuous technical attention in addition to tactical decision-making. The ammunition ran out. Not 1 gun. All of them. The belts were gone, the reserve boxes exhausted, and the Japanese were still coming. Basilone ran. 150 yards through open ground, through the killing field that the Japanese attack was crossing, through the fire that Japanese rifles and machine guns were directing at anything that moved in front of the Marine lines. He reached the supply point, grabbed what he could carry of the heavy ammunition boxes, and ran back. He later described it simply. "I guess I went about 150 yards to get the ammunition, and when I got back, we kept on firing all night." That sentence, the flat, practical description of a run-through enemy fire that should have killed him, is the most Basilone sentence in the record. Not drama, not heroics. A job that needed doing, done, and then back to the work. The night continued. 1 gun section went down, the position overrun, the crew dead or wounded. Then another. By the hours before dawn, Basilone had 2 men beside him. 2. Out of the section he had started with. When the last ammunition belt was exhausted, he drew his Colt .45 pistol. The Japanese were close enough that the pistol was the right tool. He fought with it at almost arm's length in the specific, ugly, intimate violence that happens when the distance between men with weapons reaches 0. He used a machete. The after-action accounts describe him as fighting in the final hours with whatever was at hand.
PFC Nash Phillips, who was there, said afterward, "Basilone had a machine gun on the go for 3 days and nights without sleep, rest, or food. At dawn, Puller walked the line. He counted nearly 1,000 Japanese dead in front of the Marine positions. One of the Imperial Army's most experienced regiments had been stopped, shattered, broken, against a handful of Marines and 4 machine guns, and 1 sergeant who ran through the fire to keep them fed." The Marine Corps submitted Basilone's name for the Medal of Honor. President Roosevelt presented it to him in 1943. America discovered Manila John, and then America decided it knew what to do with him, which was the beginning of the part of this story that Basilone himself found the hardest to navigate. He was brought home in August 1943 for the War Bond tour. The logic was straightforward. A decorated hero, articulate and photogenic and genuinely likable, could sell more war bonds in a month of appearances than any advertisement campaign. The money mattered. The symbolism mattered. Basilone on a stage in a suit, holding his Medal of Honor, telling audiences that their dollars were keeping men like him alive. That was valuable. Raritan gave him a parade. Life magazine ran his picture. Fox Movietone News filmed the homecoming. The crowd in his hometown was estimated at 30,000 people, an extraordinary turnout for a borough of a few thousand residents, a testament to how completely the story of Manila John had captured something the country needed in the middle of a war it wasn't sure it was winning. Basilone stood on the stage and said what he believed. "Only part of this medal belongs to me. Pieces of it belong to the boys who are still on Guadalcanal. It was rough as hell down there." He did the tour. He shook the hands. He gave the speeches. He sold the bonds. And then he went to his commanding officers and asked to go back. They offered him a commission,
a promotion to officer rank that would have kept him stateside in a training or administrative role. He declined. They offered him an assignment as an instructor, a posting at a training base where his combat experience would be invaluable to the men being prepared for the Pacific. He refused. He said, in the direct language that was the only kind he used, "I'm just a plain soldier and want to stay one. I ain't no officer and I ain't no museum piece. I belong back with my outfit." The request was denied. He kept asking. They sent him to Camp Pendleton, California in late 1943, a compromise posting, still stateside, but closer to the Pacific than a Bond tour stage. It was there that he met Sergeant Lena Mae Riggy. She was a Marine, a sergeant herself, serving in the Women's Reserve, running the Parachute Rigger School. She was from Portland, Oregon, the daughter of Italian immigrants, sharp and direct, and completely unimpressed by celebrity, in the way that people who are genuinely competent tend to be unimpressed by it. He was immediately taken with her. They were married on July 10, 1944, at St. Mary's Star of the Sea Church in Oceanside, California. The wedding made the newspapers. Manila John and his Marine bride. They honeymooned on her parents' onion farm in Oregon, which is exactly the kind of detail that tells you everything you need to know about both of them. He shipped out before Christmas 1944. He never saw her again. Operation Detachment, the invasion of Iwo Jima, began on February 19, 1945. Iwo Jima was 8 square miles of volcanic rock and ash, fortified by 21,000 Japanese soldiers under Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, who had spent months building one of the most sophisticated defensive networks in the history of military engineering. 16 miles of tunnels, hundreds of bunkers and pillboxes with interlocking fields of fire. Positions built to survive naval bombardment and air attack and emerge intact when the Marines landed. The Marines who landed on the beaches of Iwo Jima on February 19th knew it was going to be bad. The intelligence was accurate about the fortifications. What it could not fully convey was what it felt like to step onto volcanic ash that swallowed your feet to the ankle and made every step an effort, while fire came from positions so well concealed that the muzzle flashes were invisible, and the men beside you went down without warning. Basilone landed with the 1st Battalion 27th Marines on Red Beach 2. He was a gunnery sergeant now, the same rank in a different war, the same man in a different body, 3 years older and everything those 3 years had put into him. The beach was chaos. The volcanic ash had stopped vehicles. Landing craft were being destroyed by Japanese fire before they reached the shore. The Marines coming off the boats were crowding onto a beach that offered no cover and no forward movement, compressing into a mass that the Japanese artillery was finding with horrible efficiency. Basilone did not stop at the beach. He moved inland. He identified a Japanese blockhouse, a concrete, fortified position covering the beach and the approach to the airfield that was killing Marines and stopping the advance. He moved on it alone, using grenades and demolition charges, working his way around the flanking approaches while the Japanese inside were oriented toward the beach. He destroyed it. He then found a Marine tank that had driven into a minefield and become immobilized, a sitting target for Japanese anti-tank weapons, the crew trapped inside while the fire came in. He guided the tank out of the minefield under direct enemy fire, talking it through the lanes between the mines while rounds landed around him. He was moving Marines forward. In the specific, practical, this is what needs doing way he had always operated, identifying the immediate obstacle and removing it, then finding the next one. The mortar shell found him at the edge of the airfield. He was 28 years old. The Marine Corps awarded him the Navy Cross posthumously, the citation describing the blockhouse assault and the tank guidance and the leadership on the beach in the careful, precise language of military commendation. He became the only enlisted Marine in the Second World War to receive both the Medal of Honor and the Navy Cross. On March 7th, 1945, her 32nd birthday, Lena Basilone was notified of her husband's death. She had been married for 7 months. She had known him for less than 2 years. She had spent most of their marriage separated from him by the logistics of a war that moved men across the Pacific with no regard for the personal timelines of the people it consumed. She never remarried. She lived for 54 more years wearing her wedding ring. She died in 1999, still wearing it. Think about what John Basilone actually chose. He had options that most men in his position would have taken without a moment's hesitation. A commission, an instructor's posting, a way to survive the war with his Medal of Honor and his reputation and his future intact. The country was offering him a gift, the gift of sitting out the rest of the war in safety while being celebrated for what he had already done. He understood what was being offered. He wasn't naive about it. He wasn't unaware that going back meant facing odds that had already killed most of the men who had been with him on Guadalcanal. He went back anyway. Not because he was reckless, not because he didn't value his life or the life he was building with Lena. He went back because the calculation he had made, the same calculation that sent him running through the killing field at Henderson Field to get ammunition, was the same calculation every time. The men needed something, and he was the one positioned to provide it. He was a plain soldier. That was what he said. That was what he meant. Plain soldiers go where the war is.
John Basilone was buried at Arlington National Cemetery. He was 28 years old. 2 United States Navy destroyers have been named after him. A highway runs through Camp Pendleton bearing his name. The United States Postal Service issued a stamp with his face. In Raritan, New Jersey, the town that gave him a parade when he came home from Guadalcanal, there is a statue of him holding his machine gun. Every year, Raritan holds a John Basilone parade. The town of a few thousand people that drew 30,000 to welcome him home has never stopped welcoming him. He was the only enlisted Marine in the Second World War to receive both the Medal of Honor and the Navy Cross. The 2 decorations together represent the full arc of what he did. Guadalcanal in the first, Iwo Jima in the second. The whole man in both. Lena wore his ring for 54 years. When she died in 1999, she was buried with it. She had spent more than half a century as the widow of a man she had known for less than 2 years. And she had decided, somewhere in those 54 years, that what they had was not something that needed to be replaced or moved past. She was right. Here is the thing about John Basilone that matters most. Stripped of the statues and the stamps and the parade, he knew what going back meant. He was not confused about the odds. He had been on Guadalcanal. He knew what the Pacific did to men. He knew that the war he was being sent back into was the same war that had already consumed most of the people he had fought alongside. He went anyway. Because the men on the beach at Iwo Jima needed someone who knew what to do when the vehicles stopped in the ash, and the fire came from positions nobody could see, and the advance ground to a halt. He knew what to do. So he went. That is the whole of Manila John Basilone, a boy from Raritan who fell in love with Manila and lost it, who ran through a killing field to keep his guns fed, who turned down safety because plain soldiers go where the war is. He went. It cost him everything. He already knew that when he asked to go back. He went anyway.